It's a solid tone for both work and play. Hey there, this episode of Some Gadget Guy is brought to you by viewers like you. All of the incredible people who share content across social media and the awesome generosity of my patrons at patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. More info on those amazing nerds later in the video. Here we go. The folks at Audeze sent these my way to test drive, share my thoughts. These are the MM-100 headphones. And conclusion, I love them. Roll credits, like, share, and subscribe. Yeah, okay, maybe we can dig a bit deeper than that. These are open back, planar magnetic headphones that lean a little more towards professional recording applications, but I think they can be really satisfying for consuming content too. Following in the footsteps of the Maxwell gaming headset that we also just recently took a look at on this channel, I like the new hardware from Audeze. Less plastic, more metal, but this is a more approachable tier for a premium headphone. It's kind of built to replace older legacy cans like my LCD ones. Immediately, on first handling, it's a headphone that used to be a bit more plastic and had that collapsible ear cup design. Priced around $400, the MM-100, they feel a lot nicer. It's a combination of magnesium and steel. I think it's a gorgeous looking headphone with a classic aesthetic and modern accents. Just a touch lighter than the Maxwell, which is a closed back gaming headset that needs to have extra components for radios and batteries. This is almost twice as heavy as the LCD one, but the ear pads are thick and cushy. The head strap has 3 positions to adjust the fit, and this should cover a broad number of users. Depending on where the strap rests and how the cans fit, like the Maxwell, I believe some folks might still find this a bit fatiguing. Every skull and pair of ears are different. I felt this was comfortable using them for medium length listening sessions, with only that slight feeling of relief when I was taking them off. The cable's also a nice touch. It's a single connection. It doesn't need to be plugged into both sides. It can be plugged into either ear cup. The main cable terminates in a pretty beefy 1/4-inch jack, and a 3.5mm adapter was included in my review kit. It definitely adds a bit of a lump. You might not want this when you're using it with a portable device like a DAC or a phone that might still have a headphone jack. I don't often hold up open back cans as great portable solutions. I'm using this mostly with a good desktop DAC or my audio recording interface. Thankfully, like my LCD ones, these are wonderfully easy to drive. Low impedance, so a phone that still has a headphone jack should get some decent tone through these, but then they really wake up when you drive them with a better DAC and amp. You don't need to go audiophile right at the start to get a taste of what they can do. You can start with something a bit more mainstream, laptop, tablet, and then work up when you start adding other bits to your audio chain, which that brings us to the sound quality. Is the most important part of any headphone review. I love them. I'm a mids junkie. I say this over and over in my videos. I love living in the frequencies where we hear the distinctiveness of vocals and the articulation of instruments and the most aggressive representation of effects like filtering and guitar distortion. I think planar magnetic headphones shine in that space. In general, I like what a planar does. But the MM-100 present tuning that gives my mids even just a touch more room to breathe. Now I feel when people hear me preach this, somehow the effect here is going to sound like a low cut or a severe roll off. Audeze is definitely tuning for more room, but I still feel Audeze's flavor is more broadly accessible than just a deep low cut, like the bass doesn't fall off a cliff. Primarily, we're tuning the sub bass a little under, but that bass doesn't feel cut. It's like a shelf sustained all the way down to the lowest frequency supported by these drivers, just tuned a little less aggressively. I really like this effect where no matter how low we go, no matter what instrument is occupying the low end of the spectrum, there is this crisp attack and precise position of everything in the mix. I need to remember to link it down in the show notes. I have a headphone testing playlist. I keep it on Qobuz if you want to check it out. One of my testing songs is Tool's 46 and 2. Tom and kick drum hits on the left ear and centered in the mix, and I can feel exactly where those hits are supposed to land. And we don't lose those eerie vocalizations and filtering, almost that zombie murmuring throughout the intro, and then the lead vocals slice through this shroud of sound design, before the song's aggression even begins to play out. I know why folks love good skull rumblers, and bass can be so delicious, and you just wrap yourself up in a blanket of fat low end. But for me, what makes a mix distinctive, or what drives the energy of a track, comes from the articulation and the placement in the mids. Where the lows can sometimes overwhelm the mix, I think it makes songs feel duller or wimpier when you're just slapping on mega bass. I'm not trying to pick on anyone, I just think this is a good example of how different considerations can affect similar music. My favorite example of this is Bulls on Parade. You take the original studio cut from Rage Against the Machine and the absolutely brilliant cover featuring Denzel Curry. I love both versions of this song, but in terms of pure aggression, I think the original Rage Against the Machine version is superior. The cover lands just a touch darker, just a bit thicker, and I think that blurs the edges on those opening attacks that really get your blood pumping. While we think of rock as big and heavy and metal and loud, there's a care or a delicacy in presenting the elements of a good mix from a band like Tool or Rage Against the Machine. Such careful consideration for how every piece is put together. There are a ton of bands out there, I don't think they get the kudos they deserve for all that attention to detail. We'll have to save my musings on mixing for a separate video. Fun shout out here in the middle of the review, what is your all-time favorite mixed rock album? Why don't we do that? I'll drop a comment, everybody reply to that comment. I'd love to hear what y'all like to listen to. And on my playlist, again, sticking with Rage Against the Machine, it's the interplay between bass and guitar on Killing in the Name Of. After the hi-hat drops out and we get the main musical theme just between the guitar and the bass, it's like those two instruments are perfectly blended together. And if I'm not getting goosebumps, then something is very wrong with those headphones or speakers. I totally got the goosebumps on the MM-100. Moving to electronica and hip hop, you're not deprived bass. It just doesn't saturate tracks. If it's Run the Jewels or Daft Punk, there's crystal clear attack. Reasonable sustain, it's just that last bit of decay that seems minimized over other bassier options. Like, of course Nile Rodgers should be front and center on Lose Yourself to Dance. But come on, you can't bury Nathan East in dull rumble. Like, after I finish this video, I'm just gonna roll with a bunch of YouTube videos of Nathan East just jamming. Man, I think I'm gonna need that. Sticking with bass guitarists, I don't know that it's as brilliantly mixed a track, but Movies by Alien Ant Farm has this bouncy, jazzy, playful bass line. It's kind of dramatic, and it's just a shame to miss when fat bass playback hits your ears with more rumble, because you lose the swing and the playfulness of what Ty Zamora is doing. And darn it, now I gotta go back and watch all of the videos on his old YouTube channel too. And you tell that I'm a really mediocre bass player who desperately wanted to be in a fun garage band with some friends. Yeah, that never happened. Moving on, there's also something delightful that happens in the highs. And I think it's a little magical to me where we can find that balance, where we get that razor sharp articulation on vocals and tremor and vibrato, but they don't overly stab you in the ear with sibilance. Swapping around my little collection of portable DACs, some of my older ESS DACs can really present sibilance in an unpleasant way. Like the combo of my ribbon headphones and an older ESS DAC, it really makes me wince. It can be painful. And just like the bass, this doesn't feel like a high cut or a dramatic roll-off. I can clearly hear the air coming out of a singer like Lorde or Billie Eilish. It just doesn't ring through a sizzling sound, or it doesn't feel unpleasant. I was getting a bit silly, but it's fun. It was fun to visit some classical and some opera and some jazz, or something like the Queen of the Night's aria in the Magic Flute. Just rings through bold and otherworldly, but these cans avoid the 2-octave jump sounding shrill. It's why people love the presentation on a good open back headphone. There's room and the sound is precise, and they feel a little more like speakers and a little less like your skull is contained in a contraption. I like this tuning. I really like this presentation, but there's a specific claim being made about this hardware. I don't have significant qualms moving these from play to work. Certainly going to be a personal preference kind of conversation, and it means a little bit more when you're tackling professional applications. I've bounced around so many recording studios, mostly focusing on spoken word and commercial voiceover. You kind of learn to adapt to whatever each studio sounds like and the hardware that they use. I come to appreciate that every professional headphone is gonna have its own quirks. It's a bit of a running commentary in headphone forums and discussions. You can make fun of the presence peak on older Bear Dynamics, for example, but that doesn't mean we haven't been using DT770s in studios for decades now. You learn how to incorporate the tuning of the headphone into the expectations you might have for adjusting your mix. I've totally had a decade of positive experiences on DT770s. Throwing the Audeze on and immediately jumping into a recording session or making adjustments to a mix, you'll probably overcompensate for the lows in your audio until you A/B this with some good near fields or some other cans. Just like anything else, you gotta get a feel for them. You have to start building an expectation. For those folks concerned about the lows, it's not difficult getting more rumble out of these drivers. Do something really silly, like take the EQ on your favorite phone music app and just lift the sub bass as high as it'll go. I did this in USB APP on Android. The driver didn't really distort. It sounded real bad doing that, but if you want to juice the lows, you have plenty of room to juice the lows on these drivers. And so if you're using these in a studio, you can easily compensate for the out-of-the-box tuning if you need to hear the lows more present or more upfront in your recordings. It's a thing I often have difficulty weighting in a premium headphone review. I think it's fair to focus mostly on the out-of-the-box tuning, as that's the claim from the manufacturer, what they feel is the best representation of their product. But really nice headphones should also be flexible and resilient when making some EQ adjustments to help you dial in the specific sound you want. I think these are at their best when you buy broadly on the tuning you like, and then it's just subtle tweaks to fine-tune that sound. If you're trying to radically alter the sound, you probably bought the wrong cans for your tastes, but that's not to say that you can't drive these pretty hard and make some pretty big adjustments. So I'm also taking Audeze at their word here. I agree with an assessment like these should be considered a semi-pro or professional recording solution first, that can also tackle some of the fun stuff second. Even for some similarities, that puts it in different territory than something like the aforementioned Maxwell, which is built for gaming first and can handle other media and entertainment and maybe some professional applications second and third. We want the right audio tool for the correct audio job, but it is fun when we find good crossover appeal. It's really lovely that we have more options to play with, and this idea is so much more competitive now for planar magnetic headphones. We're in a fun little audio renaissance of options to really treat our ears well. There are great reasons to spend a little higher up the food chain, and audiophile is more accessible than it's ever been my entire recording career, so I'll definitely be spending some more time with these on my skull after I finish this video. And back to that shout out, meet me down in the comments. I want to hear what you're listening to also, and maybe we can find a few more tracks to add to my headphone test playlist. I love digging into new audio gear. It's my first passion as a sound guy working in Hollywood. And the folks who get to see the results of my testing and reviewing first are my amazing patrons, the folks over at patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. A huge thank you from the bottom of my heart. List of names scrolling by on your screen right now. These are the people who are largely responsible for helping us to keep the lights on here in the Gadget Lab. Just an incredible crew of geeks, basically the coolest nerds in the universe. So I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy, basically everywhere, but these days I'm trying to spend a bit more time on the Mastodons, a lot less so on the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the Threads, and so much less so on the Twitters, and I will catch you all on the next review.